Hi, everyone, and welcome to Strategic Wealth Strategies. And I'm with our host, Alan Porter. Alan, what's going on, man? How are you? And you just keep on bringing these heavy hitters that know what they're talking about. And I learn so much on your show every time I talk to you.
Well, it's great to be here. It's especially great to be here with Dave McKnight. He's one of the top educational people that I've ever become involved with. It's like Tom Hagen last week. As I told you before, that David and Tom have probably taught more people about financial aspects that they never knew before. They think outside the conventional financial planning box, and they basically create a paradigm shift in what people think about conventional financial planning. Instead of a 60-40 stock split, there's a lot of other opportunities out there, and David has a great way of showing it. He's a great author. One of his great books is The Power of Zero. I give copies to people all the time. But David, it's great having you on here. It's an honor to have you on my podcast, and I'm looking forward to this.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Go ahead, Neil. You're muted, Neil.
I said, what question do you have for David first?
Well, David, the latest thing you had the book, The Infinity Code. Is that correct?
Right.
That's quite a book. It just kind of, well, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So The Infinity Code, I've written boring business books for the last 20 years, and I thought, hey, why not write a novel and couch a business type concept within the plot? And I've long railed against modern monetary theory. Modern monetary theory holds that a country who denominates its own debt in its own currency can print as much money as it wants to pay for an unlimited menu of services and benefits that they offer to its population. So, for example, Stephanie Kelton, who's probably the most well-known advocate of modern monetary theory, she says she wrote a book called The Deficit Myth, which basically says that, hey, so long as we can print money, we can we rack up as much debt as we want, and we can always pay the interest on that debt because we can always print money. Well, there are very, very few mainstream economists that agree with this. And so I decided to make modern monetary theory the central focus of a very Dan Brown-like story that's a thriller. Talks about 20 Harvard graduates who graduated in 1985, and they form a secret organization where with the hopes that one of them will rise to the office of the presidency. And once that person does rise to the office of the presidency, they can then foist modern monetary theory on the nation with, of course, disastrous consequences. So the central protagonist, Ian Becker, becomes aware of this plot and has to sort of crack a code before this person gets elected president. And so the entire plot wraps around this idea that modern monetary theory, which is a real life principle that a lot of politicians and economists on the fringe sort of espouse, that could be very, very dangerous to the future of our nation. So the idea was to write a really cool, compelling story built around something that's sort of ripped right from the headlines.
Wow. And so, David, coming up with this idea to take what you do and then write it into fiction novels, how did you come up with that idea? That's really interesting and intriguing, because you're going to get people that are intrigued by your message, but also entertain them at the same time.
Yeah, there's a very well-known business writer by the name of John Lencioni who sort of couches all of his business principles within a story, and it just makes it easier to read. The story sort of shepherds you through the entire principle, and you don't even feel like you're being taught. You're just absorbed in the story, and you sort of learn these concepts by inference along the way. And so I've long liked to write fiction, and I've done one other book that was written in the same way called The Volatility Shield. And it just is, it's a little bit more fun than writing the same old boring business book. So I decided to mix things up a little bit this time around with a very clear clarion call to the federal government and people who read this book that we're in danger should this type of thinking gain traction in today's economy.
Mm.
Well, David, I mean, that book and the Volatility Shield, that was very interesting. I give it to this guy, and he says, that kind of reminds me of myself. And I said, it reminds me of a lot of people that I talk to. And, you know, the importance of planning for retirement. I've got a gentleman, a young guy, he was 23 years old when I started talking to him. He's 28 right now, and he wanted to do a life insurance retirement plan back when he's 23. He kept putting it off. He could afford it, it's no problem. And so now he's coming back to me. And I showed him today. I said, in fact, I just talked to him a minute ago. I said, when you started out at 23, your death benefit was $279,000. Now at 29, your death benefit's $136,000. And I said, your income, tax-free income, when you're 66, was 121. Now it's 79. That's what procrastination costs people. They don't understand it. And the other thing people don't understand is the effect of taxes. And what you have shown me on how to, like that couple pages in the book, Power of Zero. These people have $1 million in assets, but you show me a way into which I can turn them into, pay zero taxes in retirement by converting Roths, long-term, not for long-term, but the long-term, the LIRP and many other ththings, because like some people say, well, I want everything in a life insurance policy. You've taught me, no, you don't want everything. You diversify your assets, because the standard deduction for a 65-year-old next year, I believe, is $30,000. So you can make $30,000 off your stock portfolio or whatever that's taxable, and you're still not going to pay any taxes. But something that you're one of the first guys to teach me, it does not affect the taxation of Social Security or the means testing of Medicare Part B, which is going to be absolutely thousands of dollars in retirement when people can't afford to pay it.
Yeah, I think you struck on something really important, that the LIRP has a lot of really interesting qualities that are certainly germane to a broad swath of the American population. But the LIRP, as good as it is, and as copious as the benefits are, it is not a one-size-fits-all silver bullet panacea type deal. It's it's a nice complement to all of the other tax-free streams of income. I usually talk about 6 different streams of tax-free income when I talk to my clients and prospects. We're talking Roth IRA, Roth 401k, Roth conversion, taking money out of your IRA up to standard deduction, as you mentioned, and having that income be offset by your standard deduction. The LIRP, which grows safely and productively in a tax-free environment. And then finally, if you can keep your provisional income low enough, then your Social Security can also be tax-free. So I try to espouse an approach where people take advantage of all the nooks and crannies in the IRS tax code. I think that all of those different streams of income have attributes that make them unique. We should be taking advantage of all of these different tax-free buckets the IRS makes available to them, because at any point in time, they could legislate any one of these streams of tax-free income right out of existence. And you need to have all the other ones there to buoy you up. And so the LIRP is certainly just a part of the puzzle. The one thing I do like about the LIRP is it's got that death benefit that doubles as long-term care. And should you die peacefully in your sleep 30 years from now, never having needed long-term care, someone's still getting a death benefit, probably your kids or your grandkids. So there isn't that sensation of having paid for something you hope you never have to use. So yeah, the IRS has a lot of opportunities to shield ourselves from that coming tax freight train that we know is bearing down on us. David Walker, former Comptroller General of the federal government, predicted in his book way back in 2010, Come Back America, that tax rates would have to double in the year 2030 or we go broke as a nation. There's another economist by the name of Brian Beaulieu. He said the perfect storm of aging baby boomers, the cost of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, interest on the national debt is going to converge in 2030 in a perfect storm, and could send our country sort of spiraling into a Great Depression unless we do something about it, 5 years ago. So there's a lot of stuff that's coming down the pike. I focus generally on the reality that tax rates, even 8 years from now, are likely to be dramatically higher than they are today. And guess what? Every year that goes by where we fail to take advantage of historically low tax rates is potentially a year beyond 2030 when we could be forced to pay the highest tax rates that we're likely to see in our lifetime.
One of the things too, David, is they don't, people don't understand long-term care. And I've been affected by this personally because several years ago, my son became 100% disabled, and it took us almost 3.5 years for him to get his disability. But 3 years after he became disabled, the mother of my two granddaughters, Lynn, at age 39, sent me a text January 5th, 2010. I'll never forget it. Alan, I've been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. They give me 6 months to live. Now, I knew nothing about insurance. So I like everybody, I thought insurance was a death product, but you had to die to benefit from it. But life insurance is the only product that will protect you if you live too long, die too soon, or get sick. But what I didn't know is you could access up to 90% of her death benefit, which is an terminal illness rider on her policy, completely tax-free. And if it had not been for that, my son would be bankrupt. And it took a huge financial strain off of me. And that's when I decided I need to educate people on what's out there, what's available, because it affects so many people. I'm very, very passionate about what I do.
Yeah, unfortunately, you have the likes of Dave Ramsey and Susie Orman. I mean, Dave Ramsey says, hey, the only person that would ever do an LIRP or cash value life insurance is a dupe that just hasn't looked into it enough. If they were just simply research it a little bit more, i.e. read his website, then they would never fall for it. Susie Orman says, if anybody ever tries to talk to you about using, life insurance as an investment, that you should never, this is a quote, never talk to that person again. Okay.
Why is that? Why do they say those things?
Because they're operating under an antiquated paradigm. Basically, what they're doing is they're saying, hey, historically, these products have been laden with expenses. They're cost prohibitive. Most of the money is going to the insurance company, particularly in those early years. Therefore, and the other thing is they say, hey, look, you could be putting this money into your 401k. Think of what you could get in your 401k. You could get 8 to 10% net of fees over time. Why would you put your money in a policy that in the case of whole life might only grow 3 to 5% net of fees over time? So there's this, I say, hey, look, the LIRP is not designed to compete against the stock market. It's designed to be a bond replacement. Tom Hegna, he may have even said this last week on your podcast. He says, if you simply reach into your stock market, reach into your retirement portfolio, take out the bonds, replace it with cash value life insurance, your returns will go up, your risks will go down, your standard deviation of your entire portfolio will fall, and you'll have a better outcome over time. And so I think that in the case of Dave Ramsey, he's so fixated on selling term insurance because he is part owner in a term insurance company.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, wow. Okay.
That benefits from that recommendation. Susie Orman, these folks they're addressing general, the broad swaths of the population who make 50,000, but they spend 60,000, and they probably aren't really the ideal candidate for cash value life insurance or the LIRP. So, they all have motivations. You sort of follow the money, but I think at the end of the day, these policies have come a long way. Insurance companies have re-engineered these programs to maximize their benefits, to minimize their shortcomings. And it's just a completely different product today than what we've seen historically. And so I would love to sit down with Dave Ramsey or Susie Orman and just look at the math. David Walker says math is the 4-letter word that explains why tax rates have to double. I say math can be the 4-letter word to explain why Dave Ramsey and Susie Orman are wrong. So, that's what we're dealing with. And our job is to sort of educate the population, a retiring generation of baby boomers, that, hey, LIRPs, when structured properly, can play a complementary role in a balanced approach to tax-free retirement.
Alan and I were able to interview a billionaire that had no idea about cash value life insurance, right, Alan?
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, and the more money you have, the more you benefit from it. So
no, this is a famous bill. This is a well-known billionaire. And Alan, tell us about that story, because that was just in our audio part of the podcast, not the
he's $1 billion investor, and I said, what do you think about cash value life insurance? He says, well, I've been told it's great for put money in there and you can will it to your kids and grandkids and things like that. And I said, well, it's also the greatest wealth transfer vehicle available today, bar none. And I said, I have a friend of mine that's an advisor I work with. He has billionaire clients, and they've got $600 to $700 million in life insurance to pay the taxes so their families can keep their assets. That's one of the things that, like Susie Orman, Dave Ramsey. I said, I agree with maybe 50% of what they say, but are they licensed in anything? I doubt it. Are they fiduciaries? I doubt it. And all they're doing is I call them financial entertainers, David. because that's all they're doing.
Yeah.
And like you said, they're $50,000 and below that spend 60,000. That's not the type of people that can buy an LIRP.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you think about it, I mean, who is the typical person that follows Dave Ramsey? I mean, his best-selling book is, focused. I mean, it's got a picture of scissors and a credit card on the cover. So basically, his main goal is to get people out of debt. And for people who are in the types of debt that Dave Ramsey is talking about, these people they aren't the ideal candidate for these types of programs. And I don't disagree that that those people can be preyed upon by those who are selling cash value life insurance advisors who are maybe over promising and under delivering. So I wouldn't, but the problem is he paints everything with such a broad brush that all of our recommendations get tainted by it. We have people that have millions of dollars that go online and they research LIRP and they get a Dave Ramsey post that says, if someone ever brings it up, you should never talk to them again, or you're a dupe and you haven't done enough research. And so, I think you got to sort of stay in your lane. And so long as Dave Ramsey stays in his lane, I think he gives very sound advice. I think that when we're talking about people that have more substantial wealth, and we have to sort of tailor our recommendations and give Gary very customized recommendations. I think that Dave Ramsey is sort of in over his head.
And who we spoke with was David Rubenstein about that, David. So if you wanted to have an opportunity to talk to Dave Ramsey, I'm the man who could end up having that happen on, and you get to co-host with me. So that's the kind of cool things that I do with my show. So David, the thing is, what tips do you provide people now looking at the best way to invest right now? What should we do, especially, with where the market's going, where you say, again, taxes are going to keep going up, stock market's going to go down for a little bit. What do you recommend is the best bet?
Yeah, so I give less recommendations on the types of investments you should be investing in, more recommendations on the types of accounts within which you should be recommending. And in my book, The Power of Zero, I talk about 3 basic types of accounts: taxable, tax-deferred, tax-free. And the premise of my book is that in a rising tax rate environment, there's a mathematically ideal amount of money to have in your taxable and tax-deferred buckets. In your taxable bucket, you should have about 6 months worth of basic living expenses. That's your emergency fund. Tax-deferred bucket, you should have a low enough balance such that by the time you reach 72, your RMDs are equal to or less than your standard deduction. That way, that distribution, that RMD is tax-free. It's offset by your standard deduction. And then anything above and beyond those ideal balances in those first 2 buckets should be systematically repositioned to tax-free. And you want to do that slowly enough that you don't rise into a tax bracket that gives you heartburn. But you want to do it quickly enough that you get all the heavy lifting done before tax rates go up for good, which I think is in about 2030. So that means that starting in 2023, we have 2023, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. So 7 or 8 years before tax rates have to go up and we slip into this predicted Great Depression. So it's really about contributing to the right types of accounts so that you can then distribute those dollars from the right types of accounts so that you can best shield yourself from higher tax rates down the road.
David, when you talk about Susie Orman, Dave Ramsey, they say credit cards and everything. And I'm part of the Smart Advisor group, and we show people how to get out of debt, but not have to change their lifestyle, but pay effective interest rate to themselves instead of the compounding interest to the financial institutions. And they always ask me how we do this. And I said, I set up an SDIC, which is a specially designed insurance account. And it shows basically, it doesn't quite pay it off as quickly as the snowball effect that Dave Ramsey's famous for. But a couple months later, you're paid off. But on top of that, you've got hundreds of thousands of dollars in a tax-free account and the tax-free death benefit that you can use for long-term care. There's absolutely no comparison. But there's so many strategies out there, David, that people are just absolutely not aware of. And as I told Neil, the stuff I'm telling you right now ought to be taught in high school. There's nothing complicated about it. It just ought to be taught. But I've talked to people that have PhDs in economics. They have no idea what I'm talking about.
Well, the fortunate part of all of that, Alan, is that more and more people are starting to come over into our camp when it comes to acknowledging that tax rates, even 8 years from now, have to rise dramatically or we go broke as a country. I frequently tell the story of the white coat investor, who I'm sure you're familiar with. The white coat investor is He's a former emergency room doctor who had a penchant for, dispensing financial advice to his fellow doctors and other dentists. And so he sort of completely removed himself from the emergency room scene and now dispenses financial advice full time. And he got a hold of my book, The Power of Zero, back in 2015. And he wrote this absolutely scathing review online, said, Dave McKnight is recommending Roth conversions. He says, tax rates ebb and flow over time. They're going to be high some years, they're going to be low some years. The future is no different than it has been in the past. David McKnight is scamming you by trying to persuade you to do a Roth conversion. And of course, I had to write him a letter from my attorney telling him to remove the word scam from his blog post, which he did. But a really interesting thing happened in the lead up to the 2020 election. Joe Biden came out with his tax proposal, and the white coat investor reads that tax proposal and makes a Twitter post in which he says the following. Joe Biden's tax proposal reads like an all-out war on the individual investor. He goes, if Joe Biden gets elected president, I am going to convert my entire IRA to a Roth all in 1 year, which frankly, Alan, I wouldn't even give him that advice. I think that's a bad advice even for himself, right? Yeah. I think that, and of course I responded to his Twitter post by saying, I'm glad to see that you're coming around, at which point he blocked me. But the point is, people, very, very few people are starting to doubt the math. I mean, David Walker's, proclamation back in 2010 that math is the four-letter word that explains why tax rates have to double. The math is staring us all straight in the face, and nobody can doubt what the implications of that math are. And so even my most, bitter antagonists are starting to acknowledge that these types of strategies make sense. And so I'm glad that people are coming around, but Alan, what our job is at this point is to help people understand that they will pay a tax, and they will pay a tax before the IRS absolutely requires it of them, but we give them permission to not enjoy paying that tax so long as they recognize that if they postpone the payment of that tax until 2030 or beyond, it will be much higher than it is today.
Well, I read a Congressional Budget Office report last month that said all tax rates, if we don't raise by 66%, we're going to be bankrupt. We can't pay the debt, the interest on the debt. And one of the things that somebody told me the other day, they said, well, cash value life insurance, I don't like it. I said, well, let me ask you this question. You can go to FDIC.gov and you can bring up every major asset of every major bank in the United States, and they have cash value life insurance as one of their top tier 1 assets. And these are supposed to be the greatest financial minds in the world. And if they think it's great enough for their corporations and their banks, don't you think it ought to be a part of your portfolio? And so they checked me out, and they said, yeah, I think that's pretty impressive what you said, because now I'm going to do the same thing the bank should do.
Yeah, I mean, here's the deal. You get cash value life insurance, you're going to be growing your money safely and productively. And these insurance companies have economies of scale such that they can even grow your money more productively. Everybody grows it, more or less safely, but they're going to grow it more productively because they have economies of scale and they have leverage to be able to buy these investments in bulk. And so Tom Hegna, Wade Pfau, they all acknowledge that if you, like I said, reach into your portfolio, remove the bonds, replace it with an LIRP, you're going to grow your money more productively with less risk, lower standard deviation. Your money's just going to last longer. And more and more people, Roger Ibbotson had a very intriguing study that talked about how these types of investments, you get greater returns for less risk. And so I think as the math comes to light and people like you and me bring these types of details to the fore, more and more people are going to start integrating them into their balanced, comprehensive approaches to tax-free retirement.
Well, absolutely, David, I can't agree with you more. But like I said, people need to think outside the box. They need to know what's out there.
All right. Well, I can't believe, Alan, do you have any more questions for David? I just want to know where people can get the book, right, Alan? So people can check out your book. David, where can they go?
Yeah, so any of my books, from Power of Zero, which is one that really put me on the map, to Look Before You LURP, to the Volatility Shield, to Tax-Free Income for Life, to the Infinity Code, they can all be bought on Amazon. If you want to buy them in bulk, you can go to davidmcknightbooks.com.
Or you can book an appointment with me because I send them out to everybody.
There you go. Just get them from Alan.
Oh, yes, definitely get him from Alan. And so, Alan, where did you learn about David? Where did you meet him first?
Oh, I met him at a conference, and I read about his book, and everything he said made sense. And when he showed me the different tax codes and all this other stuff, how people can retire tax-free, it just made complete sense to me because taxes are going to be out, over the wall here shortly. And, with inflation of what, 10%, 8%, whatever it is now, it's just unbelievable. People don't have enough money just to get by the basics.
And the big problem for all the doubters out there is that even if the federal government were to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid to the point where it's not such a liability for the country, we are soon getting to the point where the debt is so big and so onerous that the cost of servicing that debt could soon consume the entire federal budget. And when you get to the point where the entire federal budget is consumed by debt interest, then their hand is going to be forced at that point. They're going to have to raise taxes, and they're not going to just raise taxes on the rich. They're going to raise taxes on all Americans. So it's going to be a broadening of the tax base. Everyone's going to have to chip in. You can tax the top 1% at 100%, and you're not going to get enough revenue to pay for everything the federal government's promised. Everyone's going to have to pay, even people that are in 10 and 12% tax brackets. When David Walker says that tax rates have to double, he's talking every single taxpayer will have to pay roughly twice what they're paying today.
That's crazy. Well, we appreciate it, David and Alan. I mean, you just keep bringing the heavy hitters on, don't you?
Well, I bring the people that impress me, that are knowledgeable about what I care about, what people out in America should care about, because it's all about protecting your assets and protecting your family. And David, I applaud you for what you do. You've taught me a lot of things, and I look forward to more.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
We appreciate it. All right, guys, that was Strategic Wealth Strategies. Take care.